So let's go to part 2, and here we go. So use the narrowing down process, and this is straight again from 80,000 hours on how to explore. Use the narrowing down process above to cut your options down to a short list of 3 to 5. For each option in your short list, write out 1 or 2 cheap tests that you could do over the next 3 months. This is what 80,000 hours is dangerously and insanely practical, right? What they're saying is, do not get scammed. Do not spend a lot of money on tests that are frickin' not predictive. So, right? This is something that you do for yourself, your short list. Write 1 or 2 cheap tests that you could do over the next 3 months to illuminate yourself, but not allow those tests necessarily to make your decision. Then, if you wanted to try out your remaining top options, what would the best order be? Again, prioritize. And remember, we prioritize lists at the beginning of this class. I'm a big fan of making lists and then starting to put them in rank order. Consider just spending several years trying out different areas. That is, for you guys, more so than ever, you're looking at probably 5 or 6 occupations during your lifetime. That would not be unheard of, right? So when you need to make your final decision, you can use the narrowing down process again, and the website will explain this, so you can go there. If you'd like to find more about how to make good decisions and predictions, we recommend Decisive. So they give you a couple outside sources, and this is the beauty of this website once again, right, by Chip and Dan Heath. Or if you're up to it, try Super Forecasting by Philip Tetlock. And I don't know if you remember by now, but Tetlock was my advisor in graduate school, and he's big in decision making, along with his wife, Dr. Barb Mellers, right? So, and that's what you do when you're big time social psychologists and quantitative psychologists. You don't change your name because you published under your previous name. So you get married, you keep your name. So homework 14, then, right? That's what we're going to do. This is what I want you to do for homework 14. Again, make a list of options. So go down the components, write out your initial list, right? Then force yourself to come up with more. You can find ideas in the previous articles that are available on their website. If you couldn't take any of the options on your first list, what would you do? If money were no object, and I've asked you this question before in the financial wellness, what would you do? What do your friends advise? Because often it's strange that our friends know us better than we know ourselves, right? And that's, an interesting phenomenon. If already with experience, how could you use your most valuable career capital? And remember, that came from that equation we looked at earlier, right? Can you combine your options to make the best of both worlds? Can you find any more opportunities through your connections? So this is the exercise that I want you to move through. Any questions about that? If you got any questions, what are you going to do? Come to our sync session, come to office hours, and we can sort through it. But this one's about you, baby. This is about you trying to figure out where the hell you're going to go and what you're going to do. So the changing world of work, what do we know? Let's think about some of these factors that are out there before us. You might actually know these better than I do, right? When you think about it, I'm kind of old. I'm moving into dinosaur status. You guys are young and happening, right? So, workplace trends, technology is changing the world of work, and I don't think we could have any better example of how we've responded to COVID. We've got Zoom sessions. Who would ever thought that was possible? 10 years ago, not even, right? So many jobs are now automated. Think about automobile assembly. That is, you're a machine operator, then an assembler, right? Or a machine programmer, or a machine designer. So automaticity, right? Artificial intelligence becomes a lot of the new wave. Data processing is all important. Medical transcriptionists, right? But then that's due to be replaced somewhere down the road. Work can now be performed at home while traveling, even in cafes, right? I'm at home, right? This is the Caddick. What are we doing, Kyle? Kyle, what are we doing? We're working at home, right? So, who would ever thought that was going to be possible? So, nomadic work trends. Stability, security are more rare than ever before. A lot of companies are getting pretty vicious, and they have no kind of promise of longevity or loyalty to their employees. So you might expect a change. We might expect companies to have shorter lifespans in the future than they do now, or to change direction very rapidly, so increasing the likelihood of laying off existing employees. Higher rates of outsourcing. So a lot of work is being outsourced, but that could be a benefit as well because we may be more mobile. And if we're talking about truly moving into a global culture, choices about the country in which you want to live, you might be able to take your work with you, right? All kinds of possibilities available. And the free agency of the workforce. Look at the psychology department. What is the statistic? I think the tenured professors in psychology teach less than a third of the courses. So essentially the rest of us as lecturers are independent. We're contract workers, right? But as a contract worker, on the downside, I don't have a whole lot of security, but on the upside, I'm not really committed and I can move about quite a bit as well. So free agency of the workforce. Lifelong learning is a necessity. We're going to have to continue to learn. Jobs change at a faster rate. Alvin Toffler talked about this in the book Future Shock. We talked about it at the beginning of the course, right? Many skills become obsolete after 10 or 15 years. If you say, hey, I'm good with PowerPoint, and I know PowerPoint inside and out, well, PowerPoint will have a lifespan, and it's been around now for, 15 years maybe. 20 years, but it ain't going to last forever, and something new will come along and PowerPoint will just seem like an antique. Temporary employment is increasing, and this is kind of a sad story, I think, in a lot of respects, because temporary work, then I'm not committed to paying a person a pension, right? And not necessarily health care. Look at Columbus State, right? Columbus State, the health care for adjuncts, that is part-time professors. Columbus State said, look, if you're part-time, you can teach no more than 2 classes a semester. And if you teach 2 classes a semester, then you're rated at 28 hours a week. 28 hours a week, we don't have to pay benefits. So think about the poor adjunct professors. Think about people get out of college. They say they want to teach. The only job they can find is at Columbus State. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I enjoyed my time teaching at Columbus State. And I did get tenure. I was, a tenure track. But the poor adjuncts, 28 hours, and that comes with no health insurance. That's no way to scratch out a living. So many of them were teaching at 2, 3, 4 schools. 2 schools here, a school there, one more class at this 4th school, but then they're on the hook for their own health insurance. They've got no help with health insurance. Now the state teacher retirement fund they're contributing to, so the retirement might be kind of collecting money, but a lot of places don't even provide for any kind of retirement. So workplace trend. Well, I don't know. This seems kind of so obvious. The boundaries between work and home are breaking down, and here I am in the attic, the master bedroom. So, and that's weird. And my wife and I look at that. She gets preference. She's been at home a lot longer, working from home for Nationwide Insurance. She's got her office. She's got a door that closes, right, and she's down there, and that's all that's done in that office is work. Nothing else goes on there. The rest of the house is kind of up for grabs, so I'm all over the rest of the house doing my job. What is the long-term impact of that? I don't think we really know or understand. A lot of research needs to be done. Right? Decrease in non-work time, right? But on the flip side, Kia, I got my brand new little Soul out there that's not so brand new. It's got about 13,300 miles. It needs to be serviced at 13,900. But I'll tell you what, I've been at 13,000 now for months, and Kia keeps sending, you have to get your car serviced. I'm like, it's not ready yet because I don't drive anywhere. I drive to the vet's office, which is a mile away. That's basically my big outing, right? Okay. Most jobs are in the service sector, so manufacturing, which was promised we're going to restore manufacturing. Well, that was bullshit. As we see, manufacturing has not increased in this country over the last 4 years, and it's a shame that it hasn't. Some of my favorite jobs were in the manufacturing sector, and we could do that. But there's rich people, financial people are choosing to outsource it rather than do it here. So we're shifting away from good producing to service providing economy. And this then causes the disparity income between the haves and the have-nots. Right? The paper mill model is pretty impressive. When I was at the paper mill, and I got to the big paper mill in Wallula, a paper machine tender, the machine tender, right, the guy who's ultimately responsible for managing the crew who's running the paper machine, these guys could make $65,000 a year. And that's a solid middle-class manufacturing existence, but increasingly rare and becoming rarer every day that goes by. Right? So we need higher levels of education to make less money in more service-oriented occupations. But you are making a wise choice with college, right? And let's look at this graph here, the effects of education and gender on career earnings. And we can see the lowest set of bars are less than 9th grade education, and we're looking at an average income of $24,000 for men, $17,000 for women, right? When we look at high school graduate, that bumps it up to $33,000 mean for men, right, and substantially less for women. So the day when you could have, and when I grew up, the idea was a high school education, you get your high school diploma, as a man, you could get married and you could find a job and you would support your family. Probably at a lower middle income level, but that was doable. Now imagine trying to have 4 people, worker, spouse, 2 children, and try to live on $33,000 a year. The high school diploma is not cutting it. So what we have is then we have 2 people in the household working, right? And you could combine then maybe the pink and the blue bar, and we see that between the 2 people you're maybe making $50,000, $60,000 a year. Now, associate degree and community college is a great step up for a huge number of people, right? Pushes that up to $45,000. But when we look at the bachelor's degree or more, we see a tremendous jump for men, even for women, but notice the jump is far magnified for men. There is still a huge gender pay gap. Some people don't like to admit that, still exists. On average, women make, 75 to 80% of what men do. So the relationship then between identity, and we talked about workplace identity, that is, to what extent does identity, is it coupled to your employment? Well, that seems to be a function of earning. So what we see is the percentage of respondents, right, that get a sense of identity from the job. For those people who make less than $30,000, we see relatively low identity scores, right? That these people are working to earn just a living, and that's the green bar. So the blue bar, people are saying, I get a sense of identity from what I do, right? But for those folks, for the majority of the folks, they don't. Right? And then we see that shift when we go to 30 to 50,000. But let's go to the last bar. When we see people who are making $75,000 plus, right? What we see is those people, about 68% of those people get a pretty strong sense of identity from what they do. Okay. When I was at Columbus State, if I didn't teach summer, just normal overload for the 9 months, I could make about $70,000 a year. $75,000 a year. Okay. So just to give you kind of a perspective, and that's as an assistant professor, a tenured assistant professor, right, at the college. So I make far less than that, but I do get a strong sense of identity from what I do, so it's not a 100% correlation there. So let's prevent some burnout. What can we do? Establish priorities, determine what needs to be done, set reasonable goals, smart goals, right? Take things one day at a time. You have to plan, but don't get too wrapped up in the future, right? Set limits to what you're willing to do and how long you're willing to work and what you're willing to do, right? Share your feelings, that is, let them out. If you're getting burned out, find someone to talk to about it. Build supportive relationships that can help you. I'm looking forward to Friday. We had our lecturers meeting yesterday afternoon, and it was funny. We're supposed to be talking about our teaching techniques, etc., but the conversation pretty much devolved into just talking with each other to be with each other, the 9 or 10 of us that were present in the Zoom meeting. And then Dr. Supe said, could we just maybe have a meeting, maybe some evening, we could just have a meeting just to socialize? She said, I'm feeling socialization deprived with COVID, etc. Could we just, and everyone just said, yeah, let's do that. And so this Friday night, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock, I'm going to fire up the Zoom, and we're all just going to hang out together, right? We're going to build these supportive relationships because we help each other get through the transitions that we're having to make. Okay? Do things you enjoy and make some time for them. You better do that. Otherwise, what the hell is the point, right? Take time for yourself. Carve some out. Like I said, I try to take a day off a week, right? Don't skip vacations. My wife is going crazy with this one right now because she loves to travel more than anything, and COVID has just absolutely destroyed any potential for reasonably safe travel. So I like to travel as well, not to the extent she does, and unfortunately with all our cats and the way our life is arranged, we don't get to travel together anymore. Someone has to stay home and manage this frickin' insane home that we've created for ourselves. But yeah, I'm ready. I got my trip in mind. I want to fly into Schiphol. I'm gonna hop on the train. That's in Amsterdam. I'm gonna fly into Schiphol. I'm gonna hop on the train, and I'm gonna go into northwestern Germany, and then I'm gonna go through Denmark, because these are just areas I want to check out, right? So that's on my list, but it's going to be a while before it happens. So we're skipping vacations for now. Stay attuned to your health, right? And mind your health, because that's irreplaceable. Now let's talk a little bit about unemployment, causes of unemployment. Transformation of our economy. Job needs shift faster than education for jobs can occur, so we can't keep up. And it doesn't look like our country likes to spend a lot of money re-educating and retraining its workforce. It seems right now that the model is pretty much just pushing people aside, unfortunately. The automatization of jobs then exacerbates this issue. And what we see is lower wage jobs are growing at a much faster rate than higher wage jobs. So we get shifted, people get pushed out of what appeared to be at least a middle class career. Their job goes away, and now they're forced into jobs that pay far less, right? And as we said, they pay far less, but they also are tied far less to the person's identity. The effects of unemployment: health risks as a result of stress, worrying about paying bills, etc. This is hardest on middle-aged people. I think about it. What if Ohio State just told me, hey, Mark, we're not interested in your services anymore. No more teaching for you, Mark. What would I do? I'm 62 years old. Who's going to hire me? No, nobody's going to hire someone who's 62 years old, right? I mean, I'm screwed. Of course, we might argue that that's not middle age, but we could argue it's late middle age. I don't know. So, greater difficulty finding work of equal pay and equal benefits, and that's a reality. You get into a career, and man, you don't want to give it up because there's no guarantee you're going to find anything better. Estimated 12% drop in earnings when finding reemployment. And often that's a function of giving up your seniority, right, and not being able to negotiate into higher wage jobs. Workplace violence, and this is, people who lose their job and lose their identity and maybe lose their family and lose their ability to support themselves, sometimes become desperate, and increases the potential for workplace violence against supervisors. Now, let's talk about underemployment and what it is, and it's, a newer term. Who is considered underemployed? Well, it's divided into three common categories. So skilled workers and low-income jobs. So maybe we get out of school, right, and we got a bachelor's degree in business, and no one is hiring, and we can't seem to find a job, so we end up driving for Uber. And we go, oh, that's a little different, right? Or working as a bartender. A barista, if you will. And I'm not saying that these are bad jobs, but what I'm saying is our training is beyond what that job requires. The other kind of underemployment is skilled workers in jobs that don't fully utilize their skills. That is, I've got these skills, but I'm not really applying those skills within the workplace. And then there might be part-time workers who would rather have a full-time job, but all they can get is part-time employment. And I remember a teacher at Columbus State, Katie, and she was a great teacher. I'd worked with her in our psychology faculty learning community. She had applied a couple times for a full-time position, which she didn't get. But she was a great teacher, and a master's level psychology. She could get 2 classes as an adjunct, and those classes paid about $2,400. So each semester she could take home about $4,800, right, over a period. I don't even. It's horrifying to discuss it. And what did she do? Well, then she worked as a server in a pub, right? So here's someone who's highly trained, highly skilled, and can only work part-time in that profession, and that forced her to work in other areas. Now, and underemployment can be visible or invisible, right? And if you want to read more about underemployment, then I have some links there that you can explore. So, human consequences of underemployment, what are we talking about? Well, poverty, and that is living at a level where it's hard to survive. And this is where we see now the kind of the trickle-down effects, because no longer is the promise of the single breadwinner kind of viable for many people in the United States. So what we need is both partners, working, and now what happens to the children? Because now the children go unsupervised, or one of the partners has to pay for daycare, and a huge amount of their money goes to daycare. So it's a big argument for bringing extended families back into homes, which is something we kind of ran away from in the 1940s. And we have the ever-shrinking resume. If you're underemployed, right, then how do you start to fill out your resume? Because if you're seeking a job, right, in some kind of business, let's say in advertising, and some kind of entry-level executive position, but you haven't been able to find anything over the last 3 or 4 years, so what do you have? Well, I was a stalker at the grocery store, or I did this, that, or the other thing. These kind of occupations that don't really kind of pad out the resume. So when people look at your resume, it's like, oh, the last 3 or 4 years, not much going on, huh? And it just gets worse and worse over that period of time. Now imagine the psychological problems to being underemployed, similar to being unemployed, right? Anxiety, stress, but there's this erosion of self-esteem and an erosion of confidence. And every time that you're not hired, it's just one more piece of evidence that you may not be hired in the future. So what are the structural consequences? We see increased poverty within the country, right? Reduced spending, because we have less money to spend. And then the gross domestic product for the country goes down, right? So the country becomes less wealthy overall. We might see a recessionary spiral where the country, then just gives in to recession. And all this really represents a tremendous waste of resources. We have a tremendous number of people who are capable, who are motivated, but they're not being utilized. And a lot of that isn't our fault, In Psych, we talk about W.R. Deming, and he says really 85% of the problems that you observe are attributable to the system. And this is system breakdown, right? And we're operating a system that provides us with less and less opportunity. So getting ahead, polish your interview technique. You better frickin' understand. You know what? Let's break. So I'm going to break here, and we'll come back to the next part. Hang on.